un impacto notorio en Europa y también en los mensajes que estamos conociendo por parte de las distintas empresas farmacéuticas. Es un placer saludar a Massimiliano Boundurri, él es fundador y CEO en SGMC Capital. Massimiliano, thank you so much for having us a few minutes.
My pleasure.
Massimiliano, fears around the new Omicron variant have spread. What could be the impact in different assets?
Well, clearly, it's still a little bit too early to judge. We don't know enough about Omicron, and the market, of course, in the uncertainty, the first thing that they do is that they worry. We've seen that with the reaction in equity markets, which was very strong with a correction in global equity markets. But still, as of now, it's too early to really say this could be a changing factor, turning equity mood into the negative. Because, yes, it seems like Omicron could be a little bit easier to catch, but we still don't know how serious its effects could be. Therefore, we want to know more about it. Also, scientists will have to study this a little bit more. And only once we have the facts, we'll really be able to judge what impact, and if any, this will have, especially if the current vaccines are going to be good enough to at least fight this new variant.
Mm-hmm. And pharmaceutical companies as Novavax, Pfizer or Moderna are announcing strategies to address this Omicron variant. What can we expect from this sector?
Well, clearly, again, it's going to be a little bit binary because you've seen it. Let's take the example of Moderna, given that you've mentioned it. As soon as the news came out, Moderna rallied 10-20% on the day and then rallied again the following day. But now it seems like the current vaccines are actually good enough to at least partially fight Omicron, and therefore then you've seen a correction in the names. As mentioned, we don't have enough clarity now to judge, but what is certain is that we're going to have a higher volatility into these names, and we're definitely going to have also higher volatility into the markets, and global investors should be prepared for that, especially in an environment where we're going to have lower liquidity such as December.
And despite the worries about oil demand following the new COVID variant, OPEC Plus agreed to keep boosting oil output. What oil prices can we see now?
Well, oil has had a very strong year, clearly, given by the demand. We expect prices to remain roughly around these levels. Fluctuations are likely to happen again based on the headlines risk that we're going to be seeing from this new variant and from COVID in general. But overall demand for energy is likely to stay here, and unless this Omicron really becomes something which is going to halt the economies as we have seen in the past with previous variants, but as of now it doesn't look like it, then definitely oil is likely to remain supported, and we see the prices gaining a little bit of traction from here, at least staying around current levels.
And inflation is still the main character in markets. Powell said this week the current inflation is connected to pandemic factors and the risk of persistent higher inflation is rising. Should the markets be worried, or do they trust in the Federal Reserve to contain all these risks?
Well, let's say that the Federal Reserve has changed their mind quite a few times over the last few years, and especially this year. There's definitely been a bit of an issue with the narrative. So finally, they've gotten rid of this transitory word that they refer to when speaking about inflation, which clearly a lot of players knew that inflation was not going to be transitory, and now we're seeing this. Well, clearly, what the Fed is going to be doing is going to be the key risk for markets, much more so than Omicron, we feel. Really, how the Fed behaves going forward, that's the main risk. Because if you find yourself that the Fed is going to have to act much more quickly with respect to tapering and potentially hiking rates because of an inflation which is slipping out of hand, and again, this could be seen as a little bit of a self-inflicted wounds because they could have acted earlier. But anyways, if this does occur, then definitely the market is not prepared for that, is not prepared for rates rising sooner than what the current market is expecting. And that will definitely put a negative pressure on global equity markets.
Mm-hmm. And finally, Massimiliano, in taking into account this market scenario, where do you see investment opportunities?
Well, now is definitely the time to be cautious. There's a lot of uncertainty. We're running into December, and as mentioned, there's going to be lower liquidity. Therefore, movements are likely to be higher in magnitude when we have lower liquidity. That's true on the upside and or on the downside. But what we like is taking exposure to names which have been extremely beaten down and probably irrationally so over the past few months and especially the last few weeks. If you look at some of the reopening trades, whether that's in airlines, whether that's in the F&B or retail, or with respect to transportation, definitely it would be interesting to get some exposures here because you're looking nearly at the lows of when COVID was first, let's say, discovered last year. But overall, then semiconductors remain one of our key themes. But in general, it's time to be a little bit more cautious as of now.
Massimiliano Boundurri, founder and CEO at SGMC Capital. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.